And let's go live on the YouTube. Okay, so we're learning the Mammar. We've learned this before, of course. The Mammar of Zachar. So let's bring it up here. Here we go. Yeah, so we're learning the Mammar of Zachar, which is what we the part of the biblical reading that we do before Purim, which is this Shabbos. So the Mammar says like this, that Zocher es asher asalach Amalek. The Torah says, the Hashem commands the Jewish people through Moshe, you have to remember what Amalek did to the Jewish people. So it says, Zocher es asher asalach Amalek baderach. When did they do it? On the way. In Chsiv, it says after the battle of Amalek that Mechama laHashem ba'Amalek midar ledar, that it's a battle for God against the nation of Amalek. We have to remember Amalek is family to the Jewish people. The Amalek is the grandson of Yitzchak, so a nephew of Yaakov. She'ein Hashem Shalom, that God, it's brought down that Hashem's name is not complete. Ve'ein HaKisei Shalom, and his throne, his chair is not complete. Ad Shimocha Zarish Amalek, until there's a total annihilation of the descendants of Amalek. Hey Shana. Just starting, Zachar. Now here the Alter Rebbe introduces that the battle of Amalek, and the Shem says, what's the definition of the battle of Amalek? The battle of Amalek is a mechama for Hashem in every generation until we eradicate all the descendants of Amalek. And this is constantly within a struggle within the Jewish people. It's not only is in a struggle for outside the Jewish people against the nation called Amalek, but there's an Amalek that's within us. So the Rebbe, that's what the Rebbe explains. Kihine, b'chol dar v'dar, in every generation, as we say in the Agada, or b'chol yom v'yom, and every day, as the Alter Rebbe adds, chayiv adam lirois, etz asma ki'ilu yatzim mitzrayim. We have to constantly view our situation as if we're leaving Egypt constantly. And the Rebbe adds, it's not in every generation, but it's every day. Therefore, we mention Yetzias Mitzrayim every day. We don't just mention something that happened, we're mentioning something that's happening. Boiker ve'erev, in the morning and the evening, when we say the Shema, in the Vayomer. A person is constantly, every soul, he says, Kol Nefesh, every soul of the Jewish person, is constantly, man and woman, leaving Egypt on a daily basis. Now, what does it mean? That you're leaving your limitations. You're living because we have these limitations that are from within and from without, things that are restraining us, confining us. Mitzrayim is a confinement. It was people, the Jewish people was enslaved in Egypt. So every day we have to get out of the confinement of the Egypt of today. And he says, Mitzrayim, and after a person leaves Egypt, seemingly we think once you've left the situation of confinement, of avdus, of enslavement, of limitations, of meitzar, of restraint. So you think that's it, everything's open. So what happens after you leave Egypt? You're actually very vulnerable. Stands Amalek in front of you and wages battle. As the verse says, you remember what Amalek did to the Jewish people? B'derech, on the way, when you left Egypt. That's when Amalek attacks you. When you come out, you think you've just won. You've gotten your freedom. You've gotten out of your limitations. You think you're strong and you're able to go to Eretz Arachava, to the land of the plenty. Stands over there, Amalek, and puts up another battle. And we're going to learn what that battle is. As it says that it stood there as you left Egypt. So what we have to understand, what is the leaving Egypt daily? And what is Amalek that comes to fight us once we leave Egypt on a daily basis? So the Alter Rebbe explains to understand this in Knesset Yisrael, the multiple of the Jewish people, meaning to say the place of the gathering of the souls of the Jewish people, Shimakar called Neshamas Yisrael, and in that gathering is where all the souls come from. Nikra b'shem libi, that's like called the heart. Meshakasev livav tini achoisi kala, my heart, my sister, my bride. Shekamoy shahalevu mishkan ukli kibul ruach hachaim ha'ikari, just like the heart is the main receptacle within the person of their life force, of their chayas. Shemakar hachayim, the source of life, uklalusay, and in an inclusive way, meaning to say all the parts of the body draw life from the heart. Nimshach el alev, goes to the heart, el toichai, and from the heart it goes out to the rest of the body, giving each specific limb its chayis, its life, through the blood that circulates. And it has within it all the chayis, all the vitality for the body, and it distributes all the vitality to the body, again, through the circulation. And it goes in a constant going and coming. Means it's a vessel that doesn't just, it's not a one-time thing, constantly pumping in and out, and constantly giving a revived chayas, vitality to the body. So what is that? That's the heart. So he says, Kach, so too, Mokin Nishmas Yisrael, Knesset Yisrael, which is the source of where the souls of the Jewish people come from. Nikrab Shem Knesset is like a gathering, like the heart gathers in all the chayas. Al Shem HaKibitz VaKnisa, because it's the gathering and the entrance. Shemiskabetz u'mitzasef l'teicha ikar chayas. All the life force sits within what's called Knesset Yisrael. V'hashpam b'chinas Yisrael d'leila. What is it? Where is it taking from? So there's a level of godliness which is called Yisrael from above. That's the life force for the Jewish people. Goes into the Knesset Yisrael, which is where the souls are, and from there goes out life and souls to all the Jewish people. Why is it called Yisrael? Why are the Jewish people called Yisrael? Both, so to say, the light, the source of the light, and of the life, and the source of and the neshamas themselves. Why are the Jewish people called Yisrael? Because the name Yisrael represents the concept, as the angel told Jacob, Kisarisa Malikim, you're able to be a sar, you're able to be a master over the limitations of the name Elokim. The name Elokim is how God encloses himself, and he himself limits himself to the rules of nature and the happenings of the world. The Jewish people are sar. They master over the limitations of Elokim, i.e. the limitations of nature and the limitations of the world. That's why Torah overrides nature. Because that's where do they have the power to be a master over Elokim? Because the name Yudke Vavke, which is higher, is more of an essential name than Elokim. Means before the God limits himself, that's where the Jewish people come from. Shem Havaya. That's above Elokim. That on the image is the image of man, and the image of man represents the name Havaya, which means the creator, right? So what's greater, the creator or the creation? So the creator, Havaya, limits himself within the power of life that's in creation, is called Elikim. And because the Jewish people come from the name of God that's beyond creation, therefore they are a sar, and they've been empowered to be a master over the limitations of creation, which is represented by the name Elokim. So the Alter Rebbe continues like this. So, hold on. V'hinei b'chol neshamas b'frat hi nekudas alev. What does this mean within the person themselves? The level of godliness that's within them, the level of Yisrael that's in them, that's a master over Elokim. So he says, v'hinei b'chol neshama b'frat hi nekudas alev. That's at the core, at the essence of the heart, the dot, the nekuda, the point of the heart, that every single Jewish person has. Shibetiva, what does this mean? That the nature of a Jew is, has like a life of godliness within them, is like a flame that's automatically, constantly going, yearning to go upwards towards Hashem. The dafka ba'yisbarach, to cleave to God. That is the true essence of the character of the Jew. The true essence, I mean, it's not an outside character that the Jew has a desire for godliness. The essence of the Jew is, because it comes from the name of Havaya, is always wants to be connected. It's only the outside forces, outside anxieties and interests and things that you see through your eyes and feel through your body that kind of cloud over that awareness. But at the essence of the core, the soul of the Jewish person always wants to be connected to Hashem. She is Saidasa Bahari Kodesh, because the foundation of the soul of the Jew comes from a place of holiness, which is chelik elikai mimal. This is a portion of God. You're an actual portion, mamash, like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya. This mimer, a lot of this mimer basically is based on the whole idea of Tanya. The kol chefza, and what is the entire desire, which shukas and yearning of the soul, is the hibatel, is to nullify itself, to be inclusive in godliness. Not that it should be separate and experience godliness, because then that's already a yesh, that's a something. At the essence of the soul doesn't want to even have any kind of entity. just wants to be back to its source, which is godliness. Godliness and God. And from that, that's at the core of the soul. And from the core of the soul, like the heart, is the receptacle of all the koiches, of all the strengths, of all the life force of the body. And from there it goes out, and there's the godly soul that functions throughout the body. That's the seichel of the nefesh elikis, the intellect of the godly soul, the midos, the emotions of the godly soul, to feel specifics of what you're feeling. And then it goes into what you're thinking, dibur, what you're speaking, ma'aseh, what you're doing, how you behave. Sheheim bechinas levushim, the garments that we know, Tanya explains, chapter 4, that of speech, of thought, speech, and action, are the garments of the soul. What does it mean, garments? The methods of expression. As it explains the Tanya, that thought, speech, and action are not the essence of the character of the soul. It's just the levushim, the garments through which the soul expresses itself, both to itself in thought, and then in speech to others, and of course action. The gamma seichel midas, in even the actual intellect itself, not the thought of the intellect you're using to each. What does it mean? How can you separate thought from intellect? The very fact is that different people have different levels of understanding. It's not because their thought process is different, it's because their mind is different, right? This person, he or she has a good mind. And then therefore what they fill their thought with is on a higher level of understanding. So therefore, seemingly the seichel, the intellect, and the midas and the emotions are more the actual character of the soul. So he says, v'gama seichel midas, even the intellect and the emotions. Shehemi mehusa nefesh, that they're an expression of the character of the soul. But that's the way the godly soul is, that it wants to think godliness, it wants to understand godliness, it wants to feel godliness, the midos. But it also has to enclothe itself into the animal soul. The animal soul is a separate entity. That's the battle within the person. There's a godly soul with the animal soul. Again, this is all the basics of Tanya. Shebenoiga, which is the animal soul, which is not necessarily bad. Noiga means it's not necessarily driven by holiness, which has in it tov v'ra, good and bad. This is why we say, this is what Tanya says, that what we say every morning in the tefillah, that we say, the holy soul that you've given me. Who's me? It means if the soul is not you, then who's me? You're the nefesh bahamis. By the tzaddik, the Rebbe says that he or she is the nefesh elikis. Like Hillel says, he's doing a favor to his body because he is Hillel Hazak and Hillel the elder. He is the nefesh elikis. But that's only a tzaddik. The Beinoni and down, which is most people, is that me, I am the animal soul. Zara Behema we learned about. And the neshama that you've given me is the godly soul. So he says, this receptacle, which is at the essence of the heart. And from there it goes the expressions of the intellect and the emotions of the godly soul. So this point of the atmas and nefesh, of the essence of the soul, and its character. So where's there a difference between people, even within the godly soul, is only in the mind and the emotions, but the essence of the soul is equal by everyone. The difference is the very fact that there's different people who are on a higher spiritual awareness. It's not the godly soul from its essence onward is not revealed equally by everyone. But anytime there is a revelation of the godly soul, it says in Shir Hashirim, that my heart with one of my eyes, whatever is being revealed of the godly soul within this person, there has to be some sort of revelation of the godly soul, some sort of feeling. Why is it called the depth of my heart? Because any kind of feeling that's a Jewish godly feeling that's coming from the person, hey Ariel, has to come from that place. It doesn't have any other source. And because that's its source, it reveals, but not equally to each person. So now this is so to say the makeup of the person. So what is Mitzrayim in this situation? In Galus Mitzrayim, who the definition of the exile of Egypt within the person is when that core of the soul is being blocked, is being locked in, and not allowed to be expressed. So what's Mitzrayim? By definition, Mitzrayim is a lack of expression of the essence of the godly soul. What does it mean, the exile of Egypt? Because the revelation of the godly soul now is in exile. What does it mean, exile? Is very limited expression. It's like a koten, a small person. Katnus means small. And what does that mean in functionality? What is a small revelation of the godly soul mean in actual within the person? That all the person's able to be in touch with is their emunah and their belief in God. Belief is something I believe in. You don't know it. You believe it. The belief that the Jewish people are maminim, they have belief. That's the minimum expression that they even had in Egypt. Vayam they believed Moshe. Means the emunah is there, but we have, as we learned many times, emunah doesn't translate to actions. The people believed even while they were in Egypt. Yisrael maminim b'nei maminim, and the Jewish people are believers, the children of believers. What does it mean, the children of believers? We're the descendants of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, who were believers. So the belief is the minimum that's being revealed, and that's even revealed in Galus, like it was by the Jewish people in actual Egypt. What does it say? God doesn't want that a person's whole connection to him is only based on belief. God wants to go out from the poverty of Egypt, oini of Egypt, the limitations of only having a belief, but he haven't been able to use that belief to change the das that we're going to learn, the real understanding of God. El Eretz Toiv V'Rechav, the idea is to go to the land of plenty. That's not that your connection to God is just based on belief, but have a broadness of understanding. And das doesn't mean in knowledge, but the definition of knowledge is that you actually feel it. And where's the difference between if a person is functioning on emunah, on belief, or if a person is functioning only on das, or only on belief, is the fact if we have contradictions within ourselves. The more das you have, the more absolute godliness in Judaism is. And the possibility of doing a transgression is not possible because das is real. A person could have emunah and still do averos. Why? Because it's not a contradiction to believe in God and to go against God, like the example they give of the thief who's about to rob and calls out to God. You're calling out to God because you believe in Him, but you're asking God to help you to do something that's forbidden. The idea of what God wants, not just that we should believe in God, but to know that I'm God. It should be it should be a reality to you. And what does it mean to have broadness, to go to the land of broadness? We are the land. Eretz Chayfetz. The Jewish people are the land. The land of the plenty is that das spreads out, that becomes our reality. And what does that mean in emotions? Our heart is lit up because it's being revealed. That the heart is inflamed. And this flame doesn't just remain in the heart, it expresses itself throughout the powers of the body. In an eternal way, it's a real way. But if it's only based on belief, if it only stays within a person in an encompassing way, and therefore the person has the contradictions within themselves. I believe in God, but it has nothing to do with my behavior. Excuse me. What does it mean to have a broadness of understanding? As the rabbis have said, it says that if a person wants to live long, is to, when you say, a lot of people say echad long. Mayrich means to be long. When you say the echad after Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem echad, well, what does it really mean to be mayrich be'echad? It's not just to say it loud and shul, but to broaden it in your mind. In the depth of your heart, then how far as your mind reaches within you should be marich, it should be full of the oneness of God. And what does it mean to be one in all within your entire entity of the oneness of God? Is the realization that God doesn't change, the level of God beyond creation, the idea of soviv kalamim. God is the same the way He was before and after the creation. And even now, in heaven and earth, God hasn't changed just because creation started. Creation hasn't changed anything by the essence of God, although it exists. It's only a ray, meaning to say that it's been a contracted level of godliness that limited itself within creation, to give the perception of separation, and change. But God hasn't changed. What's the definition of change? The definition of change doesn't just mean that God's changed. It means that He doesn't get affected. Right? Change is also your emotional change, or you get upset, you're happy. If you do something nice to me, I get happy. If you do something upset at me, I'm angry. Right? So people think God's angry with me. He's not angry with me. He doesn't change. He's always loving creation, although there's discipline within creation. It's not a contradiction by God. And when you realize that godliness is that He's not limited to creation, He's beyond creation, therefore He has no change within Him. All you want to do is be nullified to Hashem. And what's your true want? Why would you want anything that's limited when you could have a relationship with limitless? The best desirable thing in the world is limited, lasts for so long. God, the relationship, you could really build a pleasure and a yearning and a desire for godliness. It's a relationship with something that's everlasting. And therefore you have a desire. That's the desire of a tzaddik, is burning for Hashem, like the Rasha, like the wicked person burns for something of the world. And because the angels have more awareness, they're aflamed with their love and desire for Hashem. And the more you lengthen that idea within you, which is what it means to be ma'irich be'echad, to belong with the idea of the oneness of God. Again, it doesn't just mean to say echad loud and shul. In length and depth, in the eye of your mind, in your heart. The more you become real with this idea and becomes a reality to you, the more you're going to understand that's the only thing you want. That's why what the Alter Rebbe said. I don't want your Garden of Eden. I don't want your Olam Haba. I don't want your Garden of Eden. I only want you. Even Garden of Eden and Olam Haba is an expression. I don't want an expression. I want the essence of God. Like the Alter Rebbe says, who's with me in heaven? Whatever's with you, I don't want. I only want to cleave to Hashem. And when a person is ma'irich be'echad, that means to leave Egypt. What's going to be that? What's the outcome of this intellectual exercise? This is boniness, this contemplation. It awakens the v'haftas Hashem lekecha, to love Hashem your Lord. That both sides of your heart. That the only desire your heart wants is for Hashem. That's revealed within the person. So what did we say? What is Mitzrayim? Mitzrayim is a lack of revelation. We have mamash, a minimal amount that expresses itself in belief, that stays in an encompassing way and it's not a contradiction, belief and behavior. The more das you have, the eretz archava, the more that becomes who you are. That's the only thing you want. And it's in a way of being, it's not because you're exercising control. That's only what you want. Be slavis, with a passion and a fire. And if you really want something, you're not going to let anything get in the way. There's going to be no Mitzrayim. If Mitzrayim tries to get up in front of you, I'm a free man now. I'm a free woman now. Well, up to the extent of Mesiras Nefesh. I don't even matter. I'm ready to give myself for God. But not just to die for God, but to throw out the wants of the animal soul, to live for God. That the wants of the animal soul, you're not going to give into the wants of the animal soul. And all you're going to give into, all you're going to be driven by is the wants of the godly soul. And all that's going to be expressive and functioning within the person is going to be the inner core of the person's soul. And this is what it means, the gathering place of the Jewish souls, and as in its awareness within the person. Like we said before, what is Yisrael above? That we are the receptacle to that. Is the Shem Havaya. The Knesset Yisrael, and when it's revealed within the person, so the Knesset Yisrael is Makabelas v'Knesset Aseichai Achais v'Ashavim B'Chinasu. It holds it and it reveals it within the person in all its functionality, in all the 248 limbs of the body. So that's B'chol Levavcha. Deeper than that, B'chol Nafshecha is with all your soul. What does that mean? That it's not just that your soul, the intellect and the emotions of the soul, but your thoughts, speech, and action are all about godliness. Even when you're not, it doesn't mean that you're saying Tehillim all day, or you're thinking Tehillim all day, or you're doing only Torah mitzvahs. Even when you're out in the world, the drive of why you're doing anything in the world is as a way to be a servant of God, an expression of God, bringing a dwelling for God in this world. I mean, everything's going to be about this mission of a relationship you have with God. It's like a person who's obsessed. That's what Shlomo Melch says. I'm obsessed. I'm sick with my love for God. So when the person's obsessed, all he thinks, speak, and act is based on that obsession. That the person becomes one with the thought of God and the speech of God. It says that these words of Torah, the essence of God, encloses himself in Torah, is within the person while he's learning Torah, while she's learning Torah, while they're doing mitzvahs. These are the actual words of God. The God, so to say, encloses himself in an absolute dveikus, cleavingness between the person and God. Even though the prophet says, what do you mean? My thoughts are not your thoughts. So how could a human's thoughts be connected to God's thoughts? So how can we say that my thoughts are enclosed and become one with the thoughts of God? So that's, he says, you have to read, this is when the Alter Rebbe translates beautifully this idea of Yeshaya Hanavi, that says that my thoughts are not like my thoughts. But why are my thoughts not like God's thoughts? There's a reason why, not because it can't be. Because is because your ways are not my ways. You can't have your thoughts to be in line with God's thoughts if your ways are not the ways of God. If your ways, and what's the ways mean? Your behaviorisms are the way Hashem wants it, then your thoughts could be like his thoughts. When does the prophet say that my thought is not your thought? It's only when because your ways are not my ways. When is it my thoughts not your thoughts? When's God saying that you can't think in line with me? When you don't do the things that you're supposed to do, means your ways are not my ways. But if your ways are the ways of Hashem, what does that mean that your ways are the ways of Hashem? That you permeate your thought through his bindness of the oneness of God through your entire being. Well, like we said before, in your sechel, your intellect, your emotions, and expressive in your machshava, your thought, speech, and action. That is the way of God. And you're bringing it down, and your love for God. Then your thoughts could be my thoughts. That's why we say after a person reaches v'yahavta, then it could be you could connect to the oneness of God. The God is talking through you through studying of Torah because you've become in line with God. God's thinking is connected to your thinking. Now he says, this idea that a person is able to reveal and open up the essence of their soul in the essence of the heart when they say the Shema, it should really be the Hashem Echad and permeate through your entire being. That on the highest level is to reveal not a love of agenda, but a love of pleasure. Tanugim is pleasure, tainug. The highest level of love. That you should take pleasure in godliness. This anig al Hashem. That's what it means when we say in the song, this anig al Hashem, take pleasure in godliness. Because of Zohar, achalti yarim divshi. I eat it all together. The sweetness is all one. It's a sweetness. When a person is truly has an awareness and a revelation of that, there's nothing else in creation. There's nothing else that really exists but God. Right? When is there a problem? When you think there's other things out there, and you want those things, and those things are not exactly what God wants you to want. But if you realize that there's ein od mevado, like the chassid who Rebbe Yamin Klatzker, who is doing a huge accounting on his orchards, how many trees he sold, all the details of his business transactions. And at the end, he wrote, instead of writing the number or the money he made or lost, whatever it was, his conclusion was ein od mevado. Why? Because the whole business, which is a business, and you know the details, how much he sold, how much he bought, what was the value, etc., etc. What's the bottom line of it all? Ein od mevado. There's nothing else but God. And that, and we're talking obviously about the tzaddik here, that I have no other life, nothing else that's alive to me, so to say. I have no other pleasure. God is my life source. Anything real pleasure and anything of real life is godliness. If that's the case, then just like you would love your own life, and you realize that what is my life? Godliness. Therefore, just like you love yourself, you love God. And this is a revelation of the essence of the soul. Again, it's not an acquired love. That's the point over here. The whole point of all these mammarim we've been learning in Shemais and Mishpatim, all these ideas, it's not an acquired thing. Something that's acquired that's outside of you. It's so much harder. How could you take something that you don't have? This is all embedded in the DNA of every single Jewish soul. It's just the Mitzrayim is that's not revealed. So if you don't reveal it, therefore there's other things that you want and love and have a yearning towards. But if you revealed what your core is, then that's all you would want. That's what he says. Why? Because this is what the essence of the soul is made up of. So too, it has to be revealed within the person. Therefore, what you take conscious pleasure is only in godliness, which is the true source of all pleasures. And you don't just serve God, but you serve God with joy. So that means the best thing for me is to be close to God. If you just taste, you would see that God is good. That's the true good. That's what it means to go. So we've jumped from Egypt to the Holy Land. The problem is you have 42 years in the desert, 40 years in the desert. You have Amalek and all the other obstacles in between. To the place of flow of milk and honey. What's sweet? Sweetness is godliness. When you say Shema, you're able to reveal godliness. We have to love God. A love of pleasure. What allows that? The person should be receptacle to that reality is because you've required das. So we've learned before that the tzaddik, that the das in a person needs to go through Moshe. That's one of the Maimarim of these are the Rebbe's ideas that run through these parshas ever since Yisrael. That to have this das, a person that to have this awareness, that you need a Moshe Rabbeinu. So he says that comes through das. But how do I get to that? If I was in Galus, means if I was born like that, the tzaddik who's born like that is one thing. But I was born and my soul was enclosed, was locked up in the exile of Egypt, in the limitations of Egypt. All I had was a little bit of the amunah, of belief. So it was locked in to the essence of the heart and had no expression. Like we said, it was very small. Umusuteris was hidden. Umuchusa was covered. Levushe nefesh, what is it covered in? That the garments and the wants of the animal soul overrode any expression of the godly soul. And the animal has animal wants. Like the Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe says, the animal, when it sees something, it doesn't see it through the seichel. It sees it through instinct. He calls it a re'iyah dimyois. He sees it like an imaginary thing. And he knows when he sees, therefore, when he sees that image, the animal knows that if he sees, or she sees grass, it runs towards it. And if she sees fire, it runs away from it. All it knows is what the animal wants. And when that's the function of the person, that's all you want. I want the grass and I run away from the fire. I run away with things that I think that could harm me. And I run towards the things that I want. What does that mean? To run after my body, what my body wants, and the pleasures that the animal wants within me. And the Alter Rebbe says each person knows what their animal is. What does it mean the animal sees the grass and sees the fire? How's it possible to change from being driven by what the animal wants to be totally consumed with what the godly soul wants? That a person should have an absolute awareness and desire for Hashem. That's why it says that the Jewish people, to get from Mitzrayim to Eretz Arachava to the land of plenty, God took the Jewish people through the desert. They couldn't go immediately from Egypt into Eretz Yisrael. They had to go through the Midbar. They had to go through the exercise of what he calls lechtech achrei b'midbar. They had to follow God. What does God say? Yirmiyahu says that God is thankful and doesn't forget that you followed me in the desert. You followed me knowing that even though you didn't have yet the revelations of the heart, you followed me to try to get the revelations of the heart. When you go through the desert, you're following God. What does it mean to follow God? A person has to go from acher, from things that have no expression. What's the difference in the back of a person and the front of the person? The back of the person has no expression. The front of the person is where all the expression is. You could, if a person's talking to you and you want to know what the person is meaning when they're talking to you, you want to see the person's face and read the body language. Is much easier to read from the front of the person, from the back of the person. So in the ideas, it says like this: within holiness itself, there's the front and there's the back. God showed Moshe only the back of Hashem. He wasn't able to see his panai, the expression, the face of God. Megillah Afa, like it says, it's like a see-through scroll that has the front and the back. As is known to those who know. There are even holy names of God, but they're called acharayim because they have less expression. There's less visual there. Also, to the godly soul has to go through a process from the back to the front. What is panim? That's the inner want of the soul, the makeup, the full expression. There it has the oneness of God. Begila mamash is an absolute revelation. And that's its only want and existence. What is its strength? It's only pleasure in God. But that's only the panim, that's only the front, so to say, of the soul. What's the back side of the soul? Doesn't have so much revelation. Like the back of a person has less expression. So here he goes into the idea of iskafia. So basically, his hapcha, total transformation, that's the front of the person. But from behind of the soul, that's iskafia. What's iskafia? It means you don't have so much. And because you're limited in revelation, in order to follow God, you have to do it through iskafia, through restraining yourself. That's why Yirmiyahu says. It's an amazing thing. Yirmiyahu, the prophet, says that although the Jewish people, that he's admonishing them for their sins in the time of the first temple before the destruction. He says that God still remembers you followed me after the desert. You went out of Egypt. You didn't have revelation yet of the inner part of your heart. You were achrei Hashem. You had to follow God in the back before things were. What does that mean in avodah and service? You had to restrain your animal soul. Although your animal soul was still burning within you, you had to restrain it to follow God. And that's what he says that v'zehu la'asais you have to force the love. She ava asuri b'leiv. It's not the revealed ava b'tanugim, the love of the pleasure. You haven't revealed that love yet, but it's an ava that's made in the heart. You have to force it through contemplation. You have to really apply yourself in the oneness of Hashem to stay on course. How he is the source of your life. It's not natural to you yet. How it's the source of all pleasures. That's why you want it to be what you want. It hasn't yet revealed into the entirety of the heart. That I don't want anything else. That takes absolute discipline of the mind over the heart. The heart is still yearning for what the body wants, for what the animal soul wants. But your mind, the das, is ready. It's more than the amuna, just belief, but it's not strong enough to transform the person. And this is the idea of the Beinoni, this is the whole idea of Tanya. That a person, his whole life is really these 42 years, these 42 travels of the desert, the 40 years of the desert. The Eretz Rachav is what the person reaches at the end of their life, at the end of creation. What's Mashiach? Like the Baal Shem Tov says, Mashiach is when we enter the land. But up until then, we're achrei Hashem, we're following God. It's moyach shalat alalev. It's discipline. The mind has to discipline the heart. Shalit afke. The word shalit means to rule, like a person who rules by force. You have to subdue the other side. You haven't transformed it yet. And as any intellectual would understand, this goes very, very deep. It's not just one single level. What you had to subdue today could come easier tomorrow, but you have to subdue even deeper. And even within holiness itself, there's agendas. that has to be subdued. So the very says deeper and deeper levels, higher and higher levels. Then even if you were able to reveal the love that you should really feel, that that's what your heart wants and your soul wants. You're able to align your thought with the line of Hashem. Until you're absolutely have a disgust for anything that's not holy, that's bad. Again, the problem that people have with issues of so to say hate, why does it say that there's this concept of hating bad? Hate, we don't like to talk about the word hate. The word hate is not a nice word. The word hate is only not a nice word when it's connected to our agenda. So when we have an agenda, so that's the ugliness of hate. But if you're really a holy person, and not just in your head that you decided you're holy, and I'm talking about bamitis, a tzaddik that has no bad in them, so then hate is a holy emotion. It's not a disgusting emotion. And the holiness is lima spara. I don't like bad things. I don't like non-holy things. But the person's not holding there yet. And therefore your mind has to control. Forcing the soul to go out of its enclosement. You could reach, like the Alter Rebbe says about the Beinoni, that so to say your animal goes to sleep, but it's not eradicated, and it's easily woken up. And what does it mean to love God with both your hearts if you haven't yet become this tzaddik, you haven't transformed? Is that you force the other side of your heart. It's a control, it's a discipline. You haven't transformed darkness to light. Here the Alter Rebbe says an amazing thing. As long as we say b'chol levavcha, as long as there's two hearts within you, that means that there's the separation between the essence of the heart and the expression of the heart. And if there's a separation of the essence of the heart and the expression of the heart, that means you haven't transformed to make it one heart. He says, our rabbis have said, so this is the story of Yaakov and his sons. Yaakov looks at his sons and he sees that they're not the level of a tzaddik, besides Yosef, right? So he says, so he wants to know where they're holding. So they say to him, that he said, just like in your heart there's only one, all you want is God, so too is it by us, but we're not the same level. By you, it's natural. By us, it's by discipline. Yaakov is Yisrael. Yaakov is Yisrael. He's the higher level. He only has one heart. He's the absolute tzaddik. All he takes pleasure in his godliness. He has no desire for something else. So what the Shvatim are telling Yaakov is, what you see in us, the struggle, is only the struggle, but we haven't lost the war. And we haven't lost the battle. Yes, we struggle. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, it takes tremendous discipline and exercise and avoda. But the outcome is the same. Just like in your heart, it's only one naturally, so too through a lot of work and effort and discipline, in our hearts, it's also only one. So too, he says, Kacha Shvatim, Shem Klos, and Shem Yisrael. The Shvatim speak on behalf of the Jewish people. Atzoif Kol Deis for all generations. Gam Mechinas HaBeinim, even if I'm not a tzaddik, I'm just a Beinoni. Shem Lamati Medregazu, that's lower than Yaakov. Alpha became Em Libeinu Echad, but still we only have one interest in our heart. Yes, it takes a lot of work and control, and it's constant battle. Because it comes through subduing. We also have the oneness of one. We also have Bilibenu in our heart, only one, in an actual sense. And therefore, all we're thinking about, yes, it's by discipline, it's not natural, but all we're thinking about is a God. This is, like I said, this Mammar is basically the entire Tanya. And this idea, this is what a person tries to reach. To contemplate, in your thinking, in the oneness of God. Each person according to how much how deep they could reach. It's in a way of force, but you're controlling that your heart should only have a desire and love towards God, and withstand any obstacles. Is breaking what I desire, and to conquer them. Through the mind that controls and disciplines the heart. This to subdue the other side that's within you, so to say, to put it to sleep, in sleep mode. And hopefully, the Alter Rebbe says, from there you'll be able to transform yourself from not that the battle's been won. God will show us, and in the full way, that's what it means when Mashiach is going to come. That's what Mashiach is. What's Mashiach? A revelation of godliness and a transformation within ourselves. Means I hear to follow from behind you. Because when I follow God, I follow God even though it's an exercise. But when you follow from holiness, that's the way. Means a person may say, it's not natural by me, so maybe it's not worth this whole exercise. But the idea is that eventually it's going to happen. That's why the Shema for most of us is an all, is a yoke. A yoke means force. Like the prophet Isaiah says, follow God even if you have to roar like a lion. Bring out the strongest strength to fight within yourself like a lion has to fight within themselves. But you're going to follow God until you're going to transform yourself. And he continues. I'm going to go to we've gotten to the whole avodah and what a person has to do. We haven't yet figured out what Amalek is in this whole story. So he says like this. When a person goes through, I'm going to skip to Vihine. When a person goes through all this, so this exercise, Nasa Hashem Shalom Vakisa Shalom, that brings a completion within the person, because the separation that it's not natural by you, and you have to subdue it, and you have to be a shalit moyach, mind disciplining the heart. So the until that exercise goes into motion, so there's a separation. So therefore, the name isn't complete. The inner part of the heart is the first two letters of God's name. The seat, the expression isn't complete. What is God? The name is, we're talking about the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei. The way God is, the first two letters are beyond creation. The hidden worlds within the person. It's not a place where you really understand, right? We don't understand Mesiras Nefesh. We don't understand the ability for a person till today in our times, for boys and girls that were taken hostages, that didn't keep things of Shabbos or kosher, all of a sudden kept kosher and Shabbos, Dafka specifically in Gaza. Why? Where's that come from? It's not just that comes from the Yudke. That's the S, because that's the essence. Again, it's not an acquired love. That's the essence of who they are. And so when it gets pushed to the wall, when this Yarden Bibas was told if he converts to Islam, they're going to make his life easier. He said, "Go, I'm not doing that." He starved him for 48 hours. So that's the Yudke. That's the first two letters of Hashem's name. That's hidden always within the person. The idea is to bring it out to the Vavke, what's revealed within the person. The Vav is the line, so to say, the path to take what's revealed, the hidden two letters of God's name that's within every person, to bring it out to revelation, to the hey, that's the receptacle, the actual part of the person. That what fills the world is ani. This is the word of God. How do we reveal godliness? Through our awakening from below, through revealing the word of God. Like it says, as Hashem Amarta, we've made God speak. We make God by us in this world, revealing godliness into our reality. It doesn't change godliness. It just reveals that even within what's the perception of separation, there's a revelation that's Hashem Echad. That's where Hashem wants to be. That's why He created the world. He didn't create the world for perfection. If He wanted perfection, He wouldn't have created the world. He is perfect. He doesn't need perfection. He created the world where there's imperfection, and to bring it in there and to reveal godliness in that space. To reveal that Hashem is one within creation. And it's within the person themselves, within our heart and our soul. That we should reveal in our heart what our mind is trying to discipline our heart. It's the idea is not just to be a control, but what does it mean? The key say that the name and God is complete. So then when you become complete. What do you really want? Do you transform yourself to Hashem, to be a person, a receptacle for God? When you awaken that within yourself, God responds to that. Then no longer does the first two letters of God's name stay revealed. To go out to the world of his Galia and Imshachim, then the name is complete. And what does the Kisei Shalom mean? That the Moishiv Melachim L'Kisei, Ve'esher Melech Le'olam. To bring, Yeshiva means the God brings himself down. Yeshiva Klapi Maila, Yebechinas Hashpal V'Aradim Madreg Lamata. Just like a person sits, they lower themselves. The idea is that through the Kisei Shalom, that creation is complete. Like a person lowers himself within creation. Let's skip down to Ach, because we have 10 minutes left, and let's try to see what the problem is. We've talked a beautiful journey of life. We leave Egypt, we get to Eretz Yisrael, but we didn't get to the problem. The problem is Amalek. There's also the negative side. And they're also trying to pull you. And he also has the front and the back. And who's the first adversary of the Jewish people? That's the Amalek. He's the backside, the neck, the back of the neck of impurity. And the word Amalek means milak, shmalika minarv. He cuts you off from the back. What does this mean? Like this. Where Amalek struggles with the Jewish people, what does Moshe say to God? When the Jewish people sinned with the sin of the golden calf. So in the argument, God said to forgive Moshe, the Jewish people, Moshe says, they're stubborn people. Seemingly the stubbornness is that, we're difficult people, so what could you do? Forgive us. But Moshe says no. Know that in your people, yes, they have. What is the vulnerability of the Beinoni, of the person who's struggling? That you fall sometimes when you struggle. You may not win every battle, but you should know that in the essence, the Jewish people are stubborn. They're stubborn for God. They want to be close to God. They're ready to go after Hashem. That's what it means. They're stubborn for God. Therefore, forgive them. Have faith in their stubbornness for you. They're going to stay 2,000 years. We're in Galus. No, most people wouldn't go through what the Jewish people went through, time after time after time, hate, oppression, etc., and still be stubborn for God. That's a value, Moshe says. They're ready, in most cases, to break their heart, to conquer their pleasures. They're ready to stand strong against any obstacles. They're stubborn for God. And just like the neck, the back of the neck is the connection between the mind, the discipline, and the heart. That the mind is ready to go through the neck and to transform what the heart desires. And trust that stubbornness that's going to bring it, that they're not just following God, but they're going to eventually only want God. But what comes on? Where does Amalek come? The opposite of that is Amalek. He's a stubbornness that wants to connect to for no reason. See that what we have to understand is that in the battle, it's not two types of people. It's not one person comes in a suit and the next person comes in their army gear. A fight is everyone's coming with equal agenda, right? It says we say in the famous Mammar of Yud Shvat of Basilagani, how do you fight the foolishness of the world? You have to be a fool for God. You can't be the normal person in the room. If everyone's crazy and you're going to try to talk logic, it's not going to work. If everyone's talking without logic, you have to talk without logic for God. You're saying I should be illogical and just give in to all that I want. I'm going to double down. I'm going to do everything crazy for God. You have to be a fool. If you want to be a fool against God, you have to be a fool for God. That's called shtus to kedusha. That's the basis of the Mammar Basilagani. Same thing over here. Amalek in the opposite. Amalek says, I'm going to be stubborn against God. I'm so against God that even when it doesn't make sense, and I know it's not good for me to be against God, I'm stubborn against God. He's that same stubborn, the Jewish person. He says to the Jewish person, don't be stubborn for God. Be stubborn against God. Your heart knows. I want to serve God. And that's my source of life. Not only is it not going to make the heart want to serve God, he's going to force the heart that wants to serve God not to serve God. He forces the weaknesses within the person. Don't be a fool for God. Don't just follow stubbornly God. He fights that. He fights it at the core. Again, the fight is always about in the same place. The Alter Rebbe always introduces this concept. You have to go to the place of the vulnerability. So too in the negative. Amalek is not going to fight you in a side place. Amalek doesn't go hit you directly where you're stubborn for God. Say be stubborn against God, even though you know you should be God. You should want to be connected. And that's why it's such a chutzpah. That's why God says there's no dealing with Amalek. There's no negotiating with Amalek. Amalek has to be eradicated. There's no logic to Amalek's argument. You know you want to be connected, and Amalek goes and says, don't be connected. Amalek means to cut from the back of the neck. He disconnects the mind to not discipline the heart by force. He doesn't allow what your mind knows. Your mind knows you should be connected. And says, so what your mind knows? Go after your heart. Disconnect your mind from your heart. That's why Amalek doesn't care. He sees all the miracles. Everyone else sees miracles and says, wow, there's a God. Amalek says, I don't care. I'm not arguing if there's miracles. So what, there's miracles? Your mind sees miracles, so what? Disconnect from the miracles. Don't let the miracles have an effect on you. He sees all the miracles. He doesn't care. He's going to fight it, notwithstanding the miracles. He's not saying the miracles never happen. Look, someone puts in bombs in a whole bunch of buses last week, set by mistake to AM to PM. Doesn't make sense. It's a miracle. So I don't care if it's a miracle. So what? It's not going to stop me from fighting Jewish people. Why? Because I don't care. So there's a miracle. But even Pari, the Alter Rebbe says, Pari says, he says, I don't know God. If I would know God, then I would agree with you. He just says, I don't know God. So what happened? Had Paro been able to respond properly to the miracles, if he wasn't punished, that God hardened his heart, he would have responded to the miracles and said, you're right, and he would have let the Jewish people out. God, that was his punishment. God didn't allow him to respond to the miracles. Klipah is brought down. That's why even the other idol worshippers that fight against the Jewish people, it's not that they're so thick inside the Klipah that they're not able to see the miracle. But Amalek says, I see the miracle, I don't care. What is Amalek and his descendants throughout the generations? And within us, we see miracles constantly and we don't care. We see the miracles constantly and we still don't care. It doesn't change us. That's why it's Amalek within us. It's not an outside force, it's within us. And he implanted that within the Jewish people, that they also don't respond properly to information. Therefore, there's no compromise. That part within you that's insensitive to godliness, that will not recognize that there's godliness and says, notwithstanding, I see the miracle, I hear what you're saying, I don't care. That's within you. You have to eradicate that. There's no negotiating with that. There's no sitting down making a compromise with that. It's Mechama b'Amalek dar shebechol dar yesh b'chinas yitzim. We're constantly trying to leave Egypt, trying to express the soul. Now your soul's opened up, and all of a sudden you want to go to the land of the plenty, and the Amalek stands there and says, "Who cares?" And you have to struggle with that. Amalek is not going to attack you when you have no life within you. You're a waste of time. He's not worth his efforts. Why is he going to battle with you? There's nothing going on within you. But you wake up for God. All of a sudden, Amalek comes in and says, "So what?" Starts bringing in crooked, making you think crooked. That's the idea of Amalek. He throws in the doubt. And therefore he says, I just want to finish off, we have to go. He says, but in the time of Galus, we're following God. As it is, we don't even have the love built in. It's not like we have the revealed love. We're following God from the backside. So then it says, we have to try to erase what Amalek has put inside us. But it says, that's God has to battle that. That kind of seed that Amalek seeded within the Jewish people to be cold sometimes, safek, kar, kerach, to godliness. So there's that. It says, you can't really conquer that. That's a battle for God. To be able to transform from being a person of struggle to being a person who transforms himself, that's for God to do. The most you could do is put up a good argument. To hope and have that God has compassion on you. We're asking God, please have compassion on us. That don't let Amalek come in, don't let Amalek make us cold, don't let Amalek take us over. And through that, when we're conscious of Amalek's attack on us, we ask God for help to keep us sensitive to godliness, to keep us sensitive to Yiddishkeit. And when Mashiach comes, it's going to be the time when Amalek is going to be eradicated and it's total. And there's going to be no coldness, there's going to be no doubt. It's going to be V'ra Kol Amet. We're going to see godliness for what it is, and not just us, the whole world. Because Amalek had an effect on the whole creation. Amalek was Rashis Goyim Amalek. They affected even the nations. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining and getting ready for Shabbos Zachar. Take the Mammar and live with it this week. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Welcome.